The Founding Fathers were a group of remarkable men. They lived in a time of great change. This was in the late 1700s, in America. These colonies belonged to Great Britain, a powerful empire. But some people in the colonies wanted something new. They dreamed of freedom and self-rule. These leaders came from different backgrounds. Some were lawyers like John Adams. Others were planters like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Benjamin Franklin was a famous writer, scientist, and diplomat. They did not always agree on everything, which is important to remember. These individuals are often called founders. This is because they helped to found or create the United States of America. They took enormous risks. They challenged the mightiest power on earth at the time. If they failed, they could have been hanged as traitors. Their courage was immense. They believed deeply in the possibility of a new kind of nation, a nation where the people would have a say in their government. This was a radical idea for its time. Most countries were ruled by kings and queens, by hereditary right. The group included delegates to the Continental Congress. These were men who met to discuss the problems with England. They also included those who signed the Declaration of Independence. This was a brave and defiant act. Later, many of the same men and some new ones gathered again. They met to write the Constitution of the United States. This document would lay out the rules for the new government. It was a painstaking process, full of debate and compromise. The summer was hot, and the tempers sometimes flared, but who exactly counts as a founding father? There is no official list. Historians usually include the signers of the Declaration. They also include the framers of the Constitution. Key military leaders, diplomats, and influential thinkers are often part of this group. Figures like Samuel Adams, Patrick Henry, and James Madison played vital roles. They stirred people to action with their words. They designed the machinery of government. Their combined efforts, despite their differences, changed the course of history. They laid the groundwork for a new experiment in self-governance. Long before the first shots were fired, ideas were the weapons. Men like Samuel Adams in Boston were masterful at stirring public opinion. He wrote powerful articles against British rule. He organized protests like the Boston Tea Party. His cousin John Adams was a lawyer. John Adams believed in the rule of law, but he also saw the injustices from Britain. He defended the British soldiers after the Boston Massacre. This showed his commitment to fair trials, even for enemies. It was a difficult and unpopular thing to do then. Patrick Henry of Virginia was known for his fiery speeches. His words could move people to tears or to action. "Give me liberty or give me death," he famously declared. This became a rallying cry for the patriots. These words captured the spirit of defiance. They showed how much people were willing to risk for freedom. Thomas Paine, though born in England, became a powerful voice in America. His pamphlet, Common Sense, was read by thousands. It argued simply and clearly for independence. Paine used language that everyone could understand. These voices argued that the British government was unfair. It imposed taxes without the colonists' consent. No taxation without representation was a common complaint. The colonists had no members in the British Parliament, yet Parliament made laws that affected their lives deeply. They felt their rights as Englishmen were being denied. The Stamp Act, which taxed paper goods, caused widespread anger. The Townshend Acts, taxing glass, lead, paint, and tea, further fueled resentment. These acts were seen as abuses of power, step by step. The idea of natural rights became very important. Thinkers like John Locke in England had written about these. He said people had rights to life, liberty, and property. The founders read these ideas and believed them. They felt that government should protect these rights. If a government failed to do so, the people had the right to change it. This was a revolutionary concept. It challenged the divine right of kings. It placed power, at least in theory, with the people. These ideas slowly built support for a break from Britain. By the summer of 1776, tensions were at their peak. The Continental Congress met in Philadelphia. The delegates faced a momentous decision. Should they declare independence from Great Britain? It was a frightening step. War had already begun with battles at Lexington and Concord, but a formal declaration meant there was no turning back. Richard Henry Lee of Virginia proposed the resolution for independence. The debate was intense, lasting for days in the humid summer heat. Some delegates were hesitant, fearing the consequences. A committee was chosen to draft the declaration. It included Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin. Jefferson, then only 33, was chosen to do most of the writing. He was known for his graceful and powerful style. He worked quickly, drawing on ideas about liberty and rights. He wrote that all men are created equal. He listed the grievances against King George III. These grievances detailed the colonists' reasons for separating. The language was bold and inspiring, meant for all the world to read. On July 2, 1776, the Congress voted for independence. John Adams wrote to his wife Abigail that it would be a celebrated day. He thought it would be marked with fireworks and festivals. Then, on July 4th, Congress formally adopted the Declaration of Independence. The bell in the Pennsylvania State House, later called the Liberty Bell, rang out. The document was then signed by the delegates. John Hancock, president of the Congress, signed his name large and clear. He supposedly said the king could read it without his spectacles. The declaration was more than just a statement of separation. It was a statement of ideals. It proclaimed that governments get their power from the consent of the governed. This meant the people themselves were the source of authority. This was a radical departure from monarchies. It laid a foundation for a new kind of nation, a nation based on the principles of liberty, equality, and self-government. The words of the Declaration would inspire people for generations, not just in America, but around the globe, in their own struggles for freedom. After winning independence, the new nation faced another huge challenge. The first government, under the Articles of Confederation, was too weak. It could not effectively raise taxes or enforce laws. The states acted like separate countries. Shays' Rebellion in Massachusetts highlighted the problems. Farmers facing debt and foreclosure rose up. It became clear that a stronger national government was needed. So, in May 1787, delegates gathered again in Philadelphia. Their task was to revise the Articles. This meeting became known as the Constitutional Convention. George Washington was chosen to preside over it. His presence lent great authority to the proceedings. The delegates included many brilliant minds. James Madison of Virginia came well prepared. He had studied governments throughout history. He is often called the father of the Constitution for his contributions. Benjamin Franklin, though old and frail, offered his wisdom. Alexander Hamilton argued for a very strong central government. The discussions were held in secret to allow for open debate. The summer was long and hot. The delegates debated fiercely. They had to balance many competing interests. Large states and small states argued about representation. Should representation in Congress be based on population, or equal for each state? This led to the Great Compromise. It created a two-house legislature, the House of Representatives based on population, and the Senate with 2 senators per state. This compromise saved the convention from breaking apart. It was a testament to their willingness to find common ground, even on difficult issues. Another major issue was slavery. Southern states wanted slaves to be counted for representation, but they did not want them counted for taxation. Northern states often opposed this. The 3/5 compromise was a grim solution. It decided that 3/5 of the slave population would be counted for both purposes. The Constitution also allowed the slave trade to continue for 20 years. These compromises on slavery would have terrible consequences later. Finally, in September 1787, the Constitution was signed. It then had to be ratified or approved by the states. Section 5. George Washington, the indispensable man. George Washington was a towering figure in the American Revolution. He was from Virginia, a respected planter and military man. When war broke out, Congress needed a commander-in-chief. John Adams nominated Washington. Washington accepted, though he felt unworthy of the task. He served without pay for 8 long years. He faced enormous challenges. His army was often poorly supplied, ill-trained, and outnumbered. There were dark times like the winter at Valley Forge. Many soldiers suffered from cold, hunger, and disease. Washington's leadership was crucial. He held the Continental Army together through sheer determination. He inspired loyalty in his men. He was not always a brilliant battlefield tactician, but he learned from his mistakes. He knew how to keep the army fighting. He understood that as long as the army existed, the revolution lived on. Victories at Trenton and Princeton boosted morale. The final victory at Yorktown, with French help, secured American independence. Washington was hailed as a hero, the savior of his country. After the war, Washington wanted to retire to his farm, Mount Vernon. He was like the Roman hero Cincinnatus. Cincinnatus left his farm to save Rome, then returned. Washington gave up his power, which amazed many in Europe. Kings did not simply walk away from power, but his country called him again. He presided over the Constitutional Convention. His calm presence helped guide the difficult debates. People trusted him. They knew he would not try to become a king. This trust was essential for the new government. When the Constitution was ratified, Washington was unanimously elected the first president. He served 2 terms, from 1789 to 1797. He knew that everything he did would set a precedent. He established the traditions of the presidency. He formed a cabinet of advisors. He dealt with foreign policy challenges and domestic unrest. In his farewell address, he warned against political factions. He also cautioned against permanent foreign alliances. Washington's leadership, both in war and peace, was truly indispensable for the young nation. He set a standard for public service. Section 6. Thomas Jefferson, Architect of Liberty and Visionary. Thomas Jefferson was a man of extraordinary talents. He was a Virginian, a lawyer, a scientist, and an architect. He designed his own beautiful home, Monticello. But his greatest contribution was his writing. As we know, he was the main author of the Declaration of Independence. His words about equality and unalienable rights resonated deeply. He believed passionately in individual liberty. He also believed in the power of education. He founded the University of Virginia, a project dear to his heart. He envisioned an empire of liberty spreading across the continent. Jefferson served the new nation in many roles. He was governor of Virginia during the war. He was minister to France after Benjamin Franklin. There he witnessed the beginnings of the French Revolution. He later became the first Secretary of State under George Washington. He often clashed with Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton favored a strong central government and commercial interests. Jefferson championed states' rights and an agrarian society. These differences led to the formation of the first political parties. Jefferson became the leader of the Democratic-Republican Party. In 1800, Jefferson was elected the 3rd president. His election was sometimes called the Revolution of 1800. It marked a peaceful transfer of power from one party to another. This was a remarkable achievement for the young republic. As president, Jefferson oversaw the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. He bought a vast territory from France. This nearly doubled the size of the United States. It opened the way for westward expansion. He sent Lewis and Clark on their famous expedition. They explored the new lands all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Despite his belief in liberty, Jefferson owned slaves. This is a painful contradiction in his life. He wrote eloquently about freedom, yet he enslaved hundreds of people at Monticello. He knew slavery was wrong. He called it a moral depravity and a hideous blot. He even proposed plans for gradual emancipation. But he never freed most of his own slaves. This inconsistency troubles many historians and citizens today. It reminds us that even great figures can have serious flaws. Jefferson's legacy is complex, a champion of liberty who also participated in the institution of slavery. Section 7. Benjamin Franklin, the Sage of Philadelphia. Benjamin Franklin was one of the most famous Americans of his time. He was known around the world. He was born in Boston but made his home in Philadelphia. He was a printer, a writer, an inventor, and a scientist. His Poor Richard's Almanac was full of witty sayings and practical advice. People loved his wisdom and humor. As an inventor, he gave us the lightning rod and bifocal glasses. His experiments with electricity made him famous in scientific circles. He was a true Renaissance man, curious about everything. Franklin was also a dedicated public servant. He helped organize Philadelphia's first fire department. He helped start a library and a university. He served in the Pennsylvania Assembly for many years. As tensions with Britain grew, he became a leading voice for colonial rights. He spent many years in London as an agent for Pennsylvania. He tried to explain the colonists' grievances to the British government, but he eventually realized that independence was necessary. He returned to America to join the revolutionary cause. During the Revolutionary War, Franklin's diplomatic skills were vital. He was sent to France as an ambassador. His job was to persuade France to help America. This was a very difficult task. France was an old monarchy. America was a new republic. But Franklin, with his charm and reputation, won over the French. He secured a crucial alliance with France. This alliance provided money, soldiers, and ships. Without French help, the American victory would have been much harder, perhaps impossible. He was a master of diplomacy. Franklin was the oldest delegate at the Constitutional Convention in his 80s. He was often tired and in pain, but his wisdom and humor helped to ease tensions. He encouraged compromise when debates became heated. At the end of the convention, he gave a famous speech. He urged the delegates to sign the Constitution, despite its imperfections. He pointed to a sun painted on Washington's chair. He said he had often wondered if it was rising or setting, but now he said, "I have the happiness to know that it is a rising and not a setting sun." Section 8. A Nation Divided, the Deep Contradiction of Slavery. The ideals of the American Revolution were liberty and equality. The Declaration of Independence stated that all men are created equal, yet a terrible contradiction existed at the heart of the new nation. This was the institution of slavery. Millions of people of African descent were enslaved. They were treated as property, not as human beings. They had no rights, no freedom. This was a brutal system. It clashed directly with the noble words spoken by the founders. How could a nation dedicated to freedom allow such a thing? Many of the founding fathers themselves owned slaves. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison were slaveholders. They lived on large plantations in the South. Their wealth and way of life depended on enslaved labor. This is a difficult and uncomfortable truth. Some founders, like Benjamin Franklin and Alexander Hamilton, came to oppose slavery. Franklin became president of an abolitionist society in Pennsylvania. Some northern states began to abolish slavery after the Revolution, but in the South, slavery remained deeply entrenched. It was vital to the Southern economy. The issue of slavery caused deep divisions at the Constitutional Convention. As mentioned, compromises were made to keep the Southern states in the Union. The Three-Fifths Compromise and the continuation of the slave trade were part of this. Some founders hoped that slavery would eventually die out, but it did not. Instead, it grew stronger in the South, especially with the rise of cotton. The founders knew slavery was wrong. Jefferson called it a fire bell in the night, warning of future trouble. But they failed to end it. This failure to address slavery had tragic consequences. It led to decades of conflict. It ultimately resulted in the Civil War, a terrible and bloody conflict. The war was fought to preserve the Union and to end slavery. It took a constitutional amendment, the 13th, after the war to finally abolish slavery. The legacy of slavery continued to affect American society for generations. It led to racial discrimination and the struggle for civil rights. Understanding this contradiction is essential to understanding American history. It shows that even heroes can have profound failings. Section 9. Echoes in Time. The Lasting Legacy of the Founders. The Founding Fathers left an enormous legacy. It continues to shape America and the world today. They created a new form of government, a republic, where power comes from the people. The Constitution they wrote is still the supreme law of the land. It is the oldest written national constitution still in use. It has been amended over time to reflect changing values. For example, amendments have expanded voting rights and abolished slavery. The system of checks and balances they designed helps to prevent any one branch of government from becoming too powerful. The ideals they proclaimed, like liberty, equality, and justice, are still powerful. They inspire people to strive for a better society. Of course, America has not always lived up to these ideals. The struggle to achieve them has been long and difficult. The fight for civil rights for African Americans, women, and other groups is part of this ongoing story. But the words of the Declaration and the principles of the Constitution provide a standard. They give us something to measure ourselves against. They remind us of the nation's founding promise. The experiment in self-government that began in the late 1700s was bold. It was uncertain. Many people at the time doubted it could succeed. The founders themselves worried about the future of the republic. They knew that a government by the people required virtuous citizens. It required citizens who were educated and engaged. They understood that freedom was not free. It had to be defended by each generation. Their debates and their writings continue to be studied and discussed. We still argue about the meaning of their words. Today, America faces new challenges, but the framework created by the founders provides a way to address them. The ability to amend the Constitution allows it to adapt. The principles of democracy and individual rights remain vital. It is important to study the Founding Fathers with all their strengths and weaknesses. We can learn from their courage and their vision. We can also learn from their mistakes and their contradictions. By understanding their complex legacy, we can better understand America itself. Their story is a reminder that history is made by imperfect people striving for great things.